Her name was on the paperwork, not his, hers. Renata Elise Caldwell, senior forensic accountant, 16-year wife, whose signature had been forged, practiced, and placed on a legal document without her knowledge, making her the registered agent of a secret LLC that had processed $214,000 in fraudulent invoices over 14 months. If that LLC had been audited even one day before she found it, she would have been the one facing criminal charges, not Marcus, not the man who built it, not the man who practiced her handwriting alone in a room she did not know about, but her, the wife, the woman whose name he had borrowed without permission and placed on a trap door he built directly beneath her feet. He did not just steal from her, he constructed her destruction and called it a business. And then he came home every night and made Sunday waffles and kissed her on the cheek and slept beside her like a man who had never done a single thing wrong in his life. What Marcus Dion Caldwell could not have calculated, what he had no way of knowing when he built this, was that the woman he had done it to was a senior forensic accountant who spent her professional life finding exactly this kind of fraud, and that she had already found it on a Thursday morning in March at 6:09 a.m. when a QuickBooks notification appeared on a shared iPad while the coffee was still brewing. She did not confront him. She did not cry or scream or move a single dollar. She picked up a pen, she opened her notebook, she wrote down $214,000 and underlined it twice. And then she made him breakfast and kept making it every single morning for 7 months. On the morning of March 4th, Renata sat at her kitchen table at 6:09 a.m. while Marcus slept 12 steps above her, and she opened a folder that contained the legal end of everything he thought he had gotten away with, and she signed her name, her real name, her actual signature, on her terms, in her kitchen, in her dark. And then she closed the folder and made 1 cup of coffee and waited for his alarm to go off at 7:15. She did not make 2 cups. By 2:15 that afternoon, a process server named Gerald was waiting in a parking garage on Peachtree Street, and Marcus Dion Caldwell never saw any of it coming. Not the folder, not Gerald, not the 7 months of silence that had preceded this moment, like a held breath finally released. She signed the papers before he woke up. Stay right here, because what you just heard is only the surface of this story. You do not yet know the full truth of that forged signature. You do not know about the second woman, and you have not seen the second twist that made even Renata's own attorney go completely silent before she could find the words to describe what she had found. Chapter 9 is why this channel exists, and if you leave before you get there, you will have missed the most important part. Subscribe right now, hit the notification bell, and stay with me because the story starts now. Cascade Heights, Atlanta. 4 bedrooms, 2 cars, 16 years. From the outside, Renata and Marcus Caldwell looked like exactly what they had worked to become. She was a senior forensic accountant at Deloitte. 11 years, $178,000 before bonuses. The kind of woman who walked into a room and made other people want to be more precise. He ran a commercial real estate consulting practice. Good suits, client dinners at area, home at a reasonable hour, most nights. Their son Jordan was 14. Basketball Tuesdays and Thursdays. His father's height, his mother's eyes. The marriage looked fine. It was not fine. But here is what nobody outside that house understood. Renata was not a woman who missed things. She was trained, professionally, systematically trained to find exactly the kind of discrepancy that her husband believed he had hidden. The question was never whether she would find it. The question was what she would do in the 11 seconds after she did. On Sunday mornings, Marcus made waffles, cast iron, wedding gift from her mother. Keith sweat on the speaker. Jordan downstairs before he was fully awake, plate sliding across the counter before he could ask. Renata told her sister Camille once, maybe 8 months before everything, that she had no complaints about her marriage. Not that she was happy, not that she was in love. No complaints. Camille had looked at her for a long moment, said nothing. That look, Renata would return to it later, again and again and again, because Camille had seen something that Renata had not yet let herself see. Or had she? That is the question that nobody in this story has ever been able to answer, not even Diane. And Diane knows everything. October, 10 months before the iPad, Renata noticed something small. Their joint investment account, 12 years of building together, showed a withdrawal pattern she could not place. Not large, not dramatic. $4,200, $6,800, $3,100, spread across 11 months. She asked Marcus about it once, casually, over dinner. He said rebalancing. He said micro-adjustments. He used the word rebalancing twice in one sentence. She let it go. Or she appeared to let it go. What she actually did was open the small notebook she kept in her nightstand drawer. She wrote down the amounts. She wrote down the dates. She wrote down the word rebalancing. She underlined it. Then she closed the notebook. She finished her wine. She asked about his day. She was already gathering. She did not yet know what she was gathering for. That answer was coming. At 6:09 a.m. on a Thursday, on a shared iPad, while the coffee was still hot. The notification appeared on a Thursday morning in early March at 6:09 a.m., and Renata almost did not see it. The iPad was on the counter because Jordan had been watching YouTube the night before and left it there, and she had reached past it to get the creamer, but when she turned back, the screen had lit up on its own. And what it showed her was a QuickBooks notification for a company called MDC Ventures LLC, invoice number 0047, amount $18,500, client Harmon Specialty Group. She stood completely still because she knew exactly what those 3 letters meant. MDC. Marcus Dion Caldwell, and she had never heard of this company in her life, had never seen it on any document, had never encountered it in the quarterly financial reviews she conducted on their shared accounts, which meant that a company bearing her husband's initials had been operating for some unknown period of time in a space entirely invisible to her, and she was a forensic accountant whose entire professional purpose was to make invisible things visible. She set down the coffee, picked up the tablet, and logged into the account. And 22 minutes later, when she finally put it down, the number written in her notepad was $214,000, and below it, 3 words she would not say out loud for another 7 months. My name listed. MDC Ventures LLC had been registered in the state of Georgia 14 months ago, with a business account at Regions Bank and a QuickBooks subscription and 47 invoices issued to 11 different clients over those 14 months, generating a total revenue of $214,000. not $1 of which had passed through their joint accounts, appeared on any tax document Renata had reviewed, or been mentioned in any conversation across 16 years of what she had believed was a financially transparent marriage. She wrote the number in her notepad and underlined it twice, and then she saw the detail that made the money feel almost secondary. The registered agent on the LLC filing, the person legally designated to represent the company and absorb its liability in the event of any audit, any financial irregularity, any legal action, was listed as Renata Elise Caldwell, with a signature beneath the name that had been crafted to look exactly like hers, placed on a document she had never seen for a company she had never heard of. She put the pen down and picked up the coffee and drank it even though it had gone cold, because the thing she was sitting with in that moment was not just the theft and not just the fraud. It was the specific understanding that he had sat somewhere alone in a room she did not know about and practiced her handwriting until he could replicate it well enough to sign her name to a legal document, which was not a crime of impulse or desperation, but a plan, patient and deliberate, constructed over time. She stood at the bottom of the stairs for 47 seconds, she counted, listening to Marcus breathe up in the dark, slow and steady, the sleep of a man with no awareness of what had just happened on the floor below him, and she thought about going up there, thought about what she would say, thought about the exact expression that would cross his face in the half-second between being caught and beginning to perform innocence. She had seen that expression once before, years ago, at a work function she had surprised him at, and she had not understood it then, but she understood it now, completely and without ambiguity, and the understanding was so clear that it carried her back around and into the kitchen, where she poured the cold coffee down the drain and made a fresh pot, and sat down at the table and opened her laptop. She had a 9 a.m. call with a client in Dallas about asset discrepancies she had identified in a third party's books, and she prepared for it fully and showed up to it completely and spoke with precision for 40 minutes. And the irony of that particular morning of all mornings did not escape her for even 1 second. But while she talked to Dallas, one question was sitting in the back of her mind like a stone she had not yet picked up. Who else knows? She did not call from the house. At 5:47 p.m., she told Marcus she needed to stop at the Whole Foods on Ponce, drove instead to the parking deck at Ponce City Market, went up to level 3, turned off the engine, and called Diane Okafor. Diane was 58 years old and had been a senior partner at Okafor and Webb Family Law in Buckhead for 19 years, and she had known Renata since 1991 from their very first week as line sisters in Alpha Kappa Alpha at Spelman College. And of the 3 people in Renata's life she trusted completely, Camille, her sister, her mother before she passed, and Diane. It was Diane she needed in this particular moment, because Diane was the one who understood both the law and the woman calling her. Diane answered on the second ring, and Renata said, "I need you to listen before you say anything." And Diane said, "Go." And Renata talked for 14 uninterrupted minutes, laying out the LLC and the $214,000 and the 47 invoices and the 11 clients, and saving the final detail for last, her name on the registered agent filing, her forged signature on a document that made her legally responsible for all of it. There were 4 seconds of silence, and then Diane said, "Do not confront him. Do not move any money. Do not say one word to anyone. Come to my office tomorrow at noon and bring everything you have." And Renata said, "I know." and she started the car and went to Whole Foods and bought salmon and asparagus and a bouquet of tulips because Marcus liked them on the counter, and she put them in a vase when she got home and made dinner and sat across from him and asked about his day, and he talked for 20 minutes while she listened like a woman who had discovered absolutely nothing that morning. How she did that is the part of this story that people find hardest to believe. But what she built over the 7 months that followed makes the answer clear. Over the next 7 months, Renata built a case the way she did everything, methodically, quietly, without a single unnecessary move or a single moment of visible distress. She requested copies of their joint tax returns for the previous 4 years, pulled her credit report under the pretense of a home equity review, and accessed the Secretary of State's business registry to download every filing associated with MDC Ventures LLC, which came to 43 pages. Through Diane's firm, she obtained a forensic subpoena for the Regent's bank account records, structured carefully as part of a separate, unrelated legal inquiry so that nothing pointed back to Renata. And she cross-referenced 7 of the 11 MDC client companies against Marcus's known professional network until the full picture came into focus. She found the account, traced the transfers, and identified where $186,000 of the $214,000 had gone. $67,000 into a brokerage account held in Renata Caldwell's name, Marcus's mother, and $74,000 into the lease and full furnishing of a 1-bedroom apartment on Lenox Road in Buckhead, and the remaining $45,000 had purchased a 2.8-carat cushion-cut diamond ring from Worthmore Jewelers in Sandy Springs. Renata had never seen that ring, but she already knew exactly who was wearing it. And that woman, the woman on Lenox Road, had no idea Renata Caldwell existed, which meant she also had no idea what she was about to walk into. Every single day for 7 months, Renata performed. She laughed at his jokes and planned Jordan's birthday dinner and attended Marcus's firm anniversary event in the green dress he had asked her to wear. And she slept in the same bed and did not flinch. And she let him touch her arm at a dinner party, and she did not move away because she had moved through the initial shock of discovery into a different territory entirely. One that was colder and clearer and far more useful than grief. Camille knew something was happening. She sensed it in April when Renata called her on a Sunday afternoon and talked for 2 hours about nothing in particular, taxes and Jordan's grades, and a book she was reading. And Camille understood that the conversation itself was not the point, that her sister needed to hear a voice that existed outside of that house and be reminded that something real was still out there waiting for her. And so Camille listened and did not press, because she understood exactly how Renata operated. In this family, the women did not move until the ground was completely prepared beneath their feet. And Renata was still laying the last of the foundation because she did not yet know about the thing Diane would discover in October, the thing that made even Diane go silent for 4 full seconds before she could find the words. In October, 7 months after the morning of the iPad notification, Diane called Renata to her office on a Wednesday afternoon at 4 p.m. And Renata knew from the tone of that call that this was not a routine update. So she sat across the conference table and waited while Diane placed a document in front of her and said, "I need you to look at something." It was the MDC Ventures LLC full operating agreement. Not just the registration filing, but the complete internal document, obtained through the forensic subpoena. And on page 7, under the heading Registered Agent and Legal Liability, there was a clause that had been inserted deliberately and written carefully. a clause stating that in the event of any financial irregularity, any audit, or any legal action against the LLC, primary legal liability would fall entirely to the registered agent. Renata Elise Caldwell, whose name and forged signature appeared on that document, was the registered agent. Diane said, "He didn't just steal from you. He engineered it so that if any one of those 47 invoices was ever investigated, you would take the fall, not him, you." And the room went very quiet. Renata looked at the document for a long moment and then asked how long it would take to establish that the signature was forged. And Diane said they already had a handwriting analysis underway with 14 business days to the formal report. And Renata said, "Then we wait 14 days. And she folded her hands in her lap and did not raise her voice and did not cry. She drove home and made pasta, and Marcus had seconds and told her it was the best she had made in a while, and she thanked him, and she meant absolutely nothing by it. That night she lay awake for 3 hours and 14 minutes, doing the math with the new information layered in. If MDC Ventures had been audited before she found it, before she had any idea it existed, she would have been the named liable party, facing a minimum of $214,000 in tax liability, potential criminal exposure for fraudulent invoicing, and the complete destruction of the 20-year career she had built with meticulous care. And none of that would have been her fault, but it would have been her consequence, because he had built the trapdoor with her name on the door. He had not just stolen from her, he had constructed a legal structure specifically designed so that she would go down if anything went wrong. And then he had come home and made Sunday waffles and held her hand at her mother's funeral and kissed her on the cheek every morning as though the structure did not exist. She got up at 4:30 a.m. and made tea and sat at the kitchen table in the dark. And what she felt was not anger. Anger was too simple, too outward-facing, too much like a feeling that needed to go somewhere. What she felt moved inward and downward and clarified everything, the way a lens clarifies when you finally find the right focal point. And by 6 a.m., she had revised the plan with 3 new elements and 2 new documents, and by 7 a.m. she was dressed for work. And she still had no idea that in 30 days, Diane would call with something even she had not seen coming. That Thursday, she went to work and billed 8 hours, took a lunch meeting with a client, sat through a deposition review at 3 p.m., and called Diane at 5:30 to confirm the handwriting analysis timeline. And at 7 p.m., she met Marcus at Canoe, the restaurant on the Chattahoochee he had suggested for their anniversary dinner 3 weeks early. And she wore the black dress and ordered the duck and listened to him talk about a midtown deal and asked appropriate questions and touched his hand twice, once when the food arrived and once when a story he told about Jordan's last basketball game made her genuinely laugh. Because the thing people never understood about Renata Caldwell was that she could hold 2 things at once without either one diminishing the other. She loved her son completely. She loved the man her husband had appeared to be with a grief that was real and earned. And she was simultaneously dismantling the legal architecture of their marriage with a precision that would have impressed her most demanding professional clients. And all 3 of those things were true at the same time, without contradiction, without performance, without collapse. They did not make her weak. They made her exactly what she needed to be. And she was going to need every bit of it, because in November, Diane called, and the second twist was worse than the first. In November, Diane called with the second twist, using the same measured, direct, no preamble tone she had used in October, saying only, "There is a complicating factor. A woman named Tasha Renee Greer, 33 years old, had filed a common-law marriage claim in the state of Georgia 6 weeks ago, listing Marcus Dion Caldwell as her spouse and the apartment on Lenox Road as their shared marital domicile. And while Georgia does not formally recognize new common-law marriages, Tasha Greer's attorney had structured the filing to invoke specific historical provisions that could give it legal traction, which meant that if the claim succeeded, it would create a competing spousal claim against the house in Cascade Heights, against the joint accounts, against every asset Renata was in the process of recovering. Diane said she was nearly certain Tasha did not know about Renata, and Renata asked how long she had been with Marcus. And Diane said, based on the apartment lease, at least 2 years. 2 years, while Renata was in that house, making his dinner, wearing the green dress, believing in the performance of the Sunday mornings. Renata said she is not the problem, he is. And then she asked how this changed the filing. And Diane said it did not change the filing, it only added one step. And Renata said she could handle one more step, but she needed to understand exactly who Tasha Renee Greer was and what she knew, and more importantly, what she did not know. Tasha Renee Greer was 33 years old, a project manager at a marketing firm in Midtown with a master's degree from Georgia State. A woman who ran on weekends and made her own sourdough, and had met Marcus at a professional conference 2 years and 3 months ago, where he had told her he was divorced, that his settlement was still being finalized, that he was raising his son alone. And then he had given her a 2.8-carat cushion-cut diamond ring from Worthmore Jewelers in Sandy Springs, $45,000, which he called a promise ring, and which she had photographed and posted to her Instagram in January. Renata had found that post in April, 5 weeks after the iPad notification, and she had screenshot it and sat with it for approximately 90 seconds before adding it to the folder. She had not contacted Tasha, had not sent a message, had not appeared at the apartment on Lenox Road, because Tasha Greer was not the enemy in this situation. Tasha Greer was a witness, and the right kind of witness with the right attorney can dismantle a legal claim faster than any document. And so Renata needed her exactly where she was, unaware, for just a few more weeks. On a Sunday evening in early November, with Jordan at a friend's house and the Cascade Heights home quiet around them, Renata sat down across from Marcus at the kitchen table and said she wanted to talk about their finances. And he set down his phone and gave her his full attention, that deliberate, practiced attentiveness of a man who had learned to perform attentiveness with the same commitment she had learned to perform normalcy. She said she wanted to consolidate their assets before January, move to a new brokerage structure, and could he review some paperwork that Diane's firm had drafted. And she set a folder on the table, and he opened it and looked at the first page, which was a standard joint asset consolidation agreement, clean and professional and real. And he did not see the second document, the one that would not be presented until a different day before a different audience. He asked if there was a reason they were doing this now, and she said end of year, tax strategy, and he said it made sense, and asked if she wanted him to sign now, and she said no, just review it, we can do it next week. And he closed the folder and pushed it back across the table and picked up his phone. And she picked up the folder and said, okay, next week, with no intention of ever bringing it back, because she had already gotten what she needed from that conversation. Confirmation, sitting right across the table from her, that he had no idea his wife had been inside his financial records for 7 months. The final week could begin. Renata Caldwell discovered that her husband had engineered her criminal liability, found the woman on Lenox Road who believed she was engaged to him, watched that woman file a legal claim against her own marital assets, and sat at a dinner table with Marcus and touched his hand twice and did not say a single word. And the final 4 chapters of this story are where everything she built in silence finally comes into the light. Chapter 7 has exact timestamps, and every one of them matters. Subscribe right now, hit the notification bell, and do not let the algorithm take you away from this before Chapter 9, because Chapter 9 has numbers in it that will make you exhale out loud. It was the Monday before everything that Marcus first felt it. Not alarm, not suspicion, something smaller and harder to name, a texture difference in the air of the house that he could not bring into focus no matter how obliquely he tried to look at it, watching Renata from the corner of his eye as she went through the ordinary choreography of her morning, coffee and laptop and email review and a brief exchange about Jordan's practice schedule, everything exactly as it always was, and yet not quite, somehow exactly as it always was. He called her at 11 a.m. from his office, which he almost never did, and she answered on the second ring with a voice that was warm and unhurried and gave him absolutely nothing to hold on to. He said he was calling about dinner. She said she would pick up something from the Indian place on Camp Creek. He said that sounded good, and he hung up and sat at his desk for a moment longer than he needed to, telling himself he was tired, which was not true. What was true was that he was sensing something that had been building around him for 7 months, as slowly and imperceptibly as light changes in a room when the sun moves behind a cloud, and he was already too late. He ordered a steak at lunch and drank 2 glasses of bourbon, and by the time he drove home that evening, the feeling had faded enough that he could ignore it, because he was good at fading things. But that particular skill was not going to save him, not this week. On Tuesday, Diane confirmed the handwriting analysis report was complete. The forensic document examiner, a certified expert with 26 years of experience and full acceptance in Georgia state courts, had concluded with 97.3% certainty that the signature on the MDC Ventures LLC operating agreement was not Renata's, that it was a skilled forgery. And it was that particular word, skilled, that stayed with Renata through the afternoon, not because he had forged it, but because skilled meant practiced, which meant deliberate, which meant he had done it more than once before he got it right. On Wednesday morning, Diane filed the formal divorce petition with the Fulton County Superior Court, and on Thursday morning, the asset recovery motion was filed, naming MDC Ventures LLC and its Regions bank accounts, detailing the full $214,000 in diversions and requesting an immediate freeze on all associated assets. And on Thursday afternoon, Diane's paralegal submitted the legal response to Tasha Greer's common law marriage claim, a response that was clinical and documented and complete, containing the 16-year marriage certificate, the Cascade Heights deed, 4 years of joint tax returns, and a precise timeline of the Lenox Road apartment occupancy. By Friday morning, everything was in order, and Diane called at 9:47 a.m. to say, "We are ready to serve." And Renata said, "Monday, 2 p.m." And that Friday evening, she sat in the bleachers at Jordan's basketball game with Marcus's arm around her shoulder and cheered when Jordan scored 12 points and told her son on the drive home that she was proud of him and she meant every word of it, while Marcus sat in the passenger seat with no idea that by Monday at 2:15 p.m., a man named Gerald would be waiting for his Navy Audi in a parking garage on Peachtree Street. On Sunday morning, Marcus made waffles. The cast iron, Keith's sweat on the speaker, Jordan's plate sliding across the counter before he could ask, and everything was exactly as it had always been, and Renata sat at the table and drank her coffee and watched her family in the kitchen and felt the specific, irreducible weight of a woman who knows she is looking at the last edition of something. Not the last good thing, but the last version of a story that had always had a different ending than the one she had been told. Jordan ate fast and told her about a play from Tuesday that his coach had broken down on video, and she listened to him completely, and Marcus refilled her coffee without being asked, and she said thank you and watched him set the pot back on the counter and thought, with a clarity that had become ordinary to her by now, "You practiced my signature." And then she finished her coffee and rinsed her cup and went upstairs and laid out what she would wear on Monday, because tomorrow was the last morning, and he was going to kiss her on the cheek and walk out the front door and not know it. Monday, March 4th, 6:02 a.m. The house was quiet. Marcus upstairs with his alarm set for 7:15, a 9 a.m. breakfast meeting at the Capitol Grill on Peachtree that he had mentioned to her on Friday and whose exact time she had noted without comment. And Renata stood at the kitchen counter in her gray robe and watched the coffee brew. The folder was already on the table. She had brought it down at 5:50 while he was still asleep and placed it precisely parallel to the table edge, 6 inches from the mug she had not yet poured. And inside it was the divorce decree, the asset recovery motion already filed, the forensic handwriting report, and a letter from Diane's firm outlining the next 60 days of legal proceedings. That was her copy. His copy was with Gerald Thomas, licensed process server, 12 years in practice, scheduled to arrive at the Capitol Grill parking garage at 2:10 p.m. and wait there for a Navy Audi. And Gerald would not have to wait long. She poured the coffee at 6:07, sat down and opened the folder to the last page, not because she needed to read it, she had read it 11 times, but because she had decided that this particular act deserved to be witnessed by at least one person who understood its full weight, and the only such person available was herself. So she read it to herself, slowly and completely, and then she picked up the pen. She signed, Renata Elise Caldwell, her name, her handwriting, her terms, her kitchen, her dark 6:09 a.m., 12 steps above her the man who had practiced her signature still asleep. And then she closed the folder and drank her coffee and watched the sky outside begin to change, the black thinning to deep blue, and the deep blue softening, and somewhere at the edge of the Atlantis skyline the first faint line of orange appearing. And she sat with the folder and the mug and the changing sky and the silence of a house that did not yet know what had just happened in it. At 6:42, his alarm went off upstairs, and she washed her mug and went up to get dressed. He came downstairs at 7:04 in the dark charcoal suit with the blue tie and the good watch, the one his firm had given him on their 10th year in business, and said, "You're up early." And she said, "Meeting prep." And she had set a mug out for him, and he poured it and stood at the counter scrolling his phone for 7 minutes before saying he would probably be late that evening, client dinner. And she said she would make sure Jordan ate. And he said, "You're the best," and put on his coat and picked up his keys and kissed her once on the cheek. She said, "Have a good day." And he said, "You too." And he walked out the front door, and she heard the Audi start in the driveway and back out and drive away. and she stood very still for a moment before picking up her phone and sending one text to Diane. "He just left." And Diane replied in 11 seconds, "Gerald is confirmed, 2:10 p.m. We are ready." She put down the phone, poured a second cup of coffee, and went upstairs to wake Jordan for school. Because in 6 hours and 6 minutes, Marcus Dion Caldwell would be standing in a parking garage on Peachtree Street, holding a manila envelope that contained the legal end of everything he believed he had successfully hidden. And he was already in the car, already driving toward it, with no idea at all. At 2:15 p.m., Gerald Thomas intercepted Marcus Dion Caldwell in the parking garage of 3399 Peachtree Road NE, handed him a manila envelope, said his name and confirmed it, and said, "You've been served," and turned and walked back to his car. And Marcus stood in that garage with the envelope in his hand for 43 seconds, which Gerald noted in his log because he had a clear sightline in his rearview mirror before Marcus opened it. What happened in the 17 minutes that followed is reconstructed from phone records and his assistant's account. He did not go to his 2:30 p.m. client meeting. His assistant called him twice at 2:45 with no answer, and at 2:52 p.m. he called Renata's cell. She was in a meeting and the call went to voicemail, and he called again at 3:04 p.m. and she was still in the meeting, and she did not step out because 6 miles away, in a bright Deloitte conference room, Renata Elise Caldwell was on a video call with a nonprofit in Washington, D.C., discussing asset discrepancies. Her phone face down on the desk beside her, already knowing everything that was happening on Peachtree Street without needing to check. The Fulton County Superior Court had granted an interim occupancy order giving Marcus 72 hours to vacate the Cascade Heights property, and on Wednesday morning, Renata and Jordan moved into the apartment she had quietly leased in Decatur in September, 4 blocks from Camille, carrying boxes in the morning light while a moving truck waited at the curb. Jordan had known since Sunday night, when she had sat on the edge of his bed without rehearsal and told him the truth in the plainest language she had. They were separating. It was not his fault. She had a plan, and he would never be unsteady if she could help it. And Jordan had been quiet for a long time before asking, "Did he do something?" And she had paused and said, "Yes," and he had nodded and said, "Okay." And that was the entire conversation. On Wednesday morning, he carried his own boxes without complaint, set up his room with the same focused precision his mother operated with, and she watched him from the hallway and felt something that had no single name: grief and pride and love, and the particular pain of watching your child absorb something adult. And she let it move through her completely before going to unpack her own room, because that evening, Marcus called. He called on Wednesday evening, and she answered, and he said her name, and she said his, and he started to say something and stopped, and started again. "I need to explain." And she said, "Okay." And she let him talk for 9 uninterrupted minutes while he used words like wrong and spiral and "I didn't mean for it to get this far," and said, "I still love you," exactly once. And he did not say Tasha's name, and did not say MDC Ventures, and did not say forged signature, as though by omitting the specific things he had done, he could contain the conversation within a version of events that was something other than what it was. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "I know." And he said, "Then can we?" And she said, "No." and she said, "Diane will handle all communication from here. Please respond through her. And Jordan is with me, and he is okay. And good night, Marcus." And she ended the call and set the phone on the windowsill and stood in the Decatur evening while the streetlights came on outside and October air came through the cracked window, not performing, nobody to perform for, just breathing and letting the apartment become real around her. And she had one question left, not about Marcus, not about the money, but about herself, about what she had known and when she had known it, and whether, in that October when she had written the withdrawal numbers in her nightstand notebook, she had actually let it go, or whether that was the moment she had begun. 4 months later, the Fulton County Superior Court issued the final divorce decree, and the asset recovery order was complete. Of the $214,000 in diverted funds, $186,000 was recovered directly. $67,000 clawed back from Renata Caldwell's brokerage account under Georgia's fraudulent transfer statutes, and $74,000 recovered from the liquidation of the Lenox Road Apartments deposit and furnishings. The remaining $45,000, the ring, was returned by Tasha Greer voluntarily 11 days after she retained her own attorney and learned the full nature of what she had been part of without her knowledge, and Tasha Greer's common-law marriage claim was dismissed in its entirety. Marcus Dion Caldwell was assessed for Renata's complete legal fees of $38,400 and referred to the Fulton County District Attorney's Office for investigation of the forged signature, an investigation that at the time of this account remained ongoing, and the Cascade Heights house was listed at $847,000, with Renata receiving 60% of the sale proceeds under the settlement terms, which came to $508,200, added to $186,000 recovered and $38,400 in legal fees. Renata Elise Caldwell walked out of the courthouse on a Thursday morning in late spring with her settlement documents in a manila folder and her phone in her pocket, and nothing she did not need. The first morning of her new life looked like this. 6:14 a.m. on a Tuesday in the Decatur apartment. Jordan's door closed because he slept until 7 on school days, and she had stopped waking him early because he no longer needed it. And Renata came downstairs and made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with one mug and one chair and the window with the morning coming through it. She was not pretending to be okay and did not need to perform okayness for an empty room. She was simply sitting inside the first morning that was entirely and unambiguously hers, not the morning after something and not the morning before something, just a morning, with a 10 a.m. call with a new client in Washington, D.C., and dinner with Camille on Thursday, and Jordan's game on Saturday that she had already told 3 people she would be at. She sat with her coffee until it was gone, washed the mug, and went upstairs to get ready, and she did not make 2 cups. There is one thing Renata Caldwell has never said publicly. She has never confirmed whether in that original October when she noticed the withdrawal pattern and wrote the numbers in her nightstand notebook and appeared to let it go over dinner, she had actually let it go at all, or whether that notebook, those underlined amounts, that single conversation about rebalancing was not the moment she was deceived, but the moment she began. The people who know her well enough to ask have mostly stopped asking. Camille has never raised it, and Diane knows the answer, but Diane does not say. And what is documented, factual, and beyond dispute is this. From the morning of the iPad notification to the morning she signed the divorce papers, 7 months passed. 47 invoices were documented. $214,000 was traced and largely recovered. A forged signature was authenticated and submitted to a district attorney. A competing spousal claim was dissolved. A house was sold. A son was moved, and a life was reconstructed. All of it accomplished by a woman who never raised her voice, not once, not in 7 months, not in a single moment of it. The question that people who hear this story cannot let go of is not about Marcus, and not about Tasha, and not about the money. It is about those 47 seconds at the bottom of the stairs, the morning after the discovery, in the dark, her hand on the banister, listening to her husband breathe above her, and what exactly was moving through her mind in those 47 seconds that she counted one by one before she turned around. She has never answered that question. She has never been asked it by anyone she believed would understand the answer. Renata Caldwell did not need anyone to save her. She saved herself in silence over 7 months, with a folder in a laptop bag and a woman named Diane who answered on the second ring. And that is exactly what this channel is for. Every woman in these stories is the most prepared person in the room every time, without exception, and if you watched this entire video, then you already know what Shattered Crown Stories TV is, so subscribe right now. Tell one person about this story, one person who needs to see what prepared actually looks like, and come down to the comment section and tell me, did she know in October? Was the notebook the beginning, or did Marcus Caldwell underestimate a woman who had simply been paying attention all along? The next story on this channel is quieter than this one. It begins with a woman who says nothing at a funeral, not because she is grieving, but because she is the only person in that room who knows how the man in that casket actually died, and she has been carrying that knowledge for 11 years. Subscribe and be here when that one drops. Shattered Crown Stories TV. The crown never falls, it just changes hands.